What's up, Sugar Muffins? I come on early to make sure we can get on, that we can sign on for Women Crush Wednesdays. Let's see what's happening. We got Lindsay Boylan coming on. She's running for Manhattan Borough President, and she's a big advocate for affordable housing. She's a progressive. She's a woman. She used to work for a man, a big, powerful man. We're going to talk to her. So let's see. All right, Allison, what's happening? We're waiting for Lindsay to join. We're waiting for everybody else to join. Let's go, Women Crush Wednesday. I got to get a song for this, for the opening of Women Crush Wednesday. For Sue TV. I got all my responses here. You know what's cool is I send out this Google questionnaire to everybody before the show, and then all the responses are there. So every time somebody answers, it just adds on. So I'm going to be able to go over them all and find the hot numbers and find the through lines. I love it. So the first question I asked them is, when in your career do you first remember a man getting preferential treatment because of his gender? That's the first question I asked. And what did Lindsay wrote? First day of first job. Oh, Lindsay's going to be telling us like it is. First day of first job. Very excited about this. Me too, right? It's good. I can't wait till I have a studio and I have a real show and I'm on the air, and then we really get the answers from the people online. We get the answers from the people in the audience. It's going to be like a destination. I'm not just going to get an audience where they just like where they treat people like cattle. Kindergarten. I think somebody wrote that. Somebody wrote that about the kids, about the boys being kindergarten. Here we go. When's the moment in your childhood you saw boys get treated better? Nice to see you too. Who is that? Is that Buck? Buck, were your ears ringing? I was talking about you today. See, that's weird. I just say it and then all of a sudden it happens. I said Bruce Springsteen got pulled over for drunk driving and nobody announced it. And then I put that up, the Los Angeles Times, like, we're not sure why they didn't announce it. I'm like, maybe because he had a huge Super Bowl ad, and then 2 minutes later, they pulled the Super Bowl ad. I was like, I just said it. So kindergarten, yes. Well, that's what Lindsay said. Lindsay said it was in kindergarten. Lindsay might be a little late because, what's up, Russo? Look at everybody's on here. So, yes, she said in kindergarten. Somebody else said junior high school, around 13. That was my first guess. Let's see. You know what else is? If anybody knows how to get these from my live feed to say, I think I have to video record them. Isn't that weird? The Instagram doesn't let you save them. They don't want you to put it on any other forum. So let's see. How do you feel about your mother, and do you feel you have more advantages than she did? Love her. I have many more advantages than she does. Oh, she had my mother and her sister. Lindsay, there you are! Lindsay Boylan, everybody! Round of applause. Lindsay's coming on. You know how to request to come on, right, Lindsay? Lindsay's running for Manhattan Borough President. She's got a lot going on. She's progressive. She's a big advocate for affordable housing, which I can't even wait to start talking about this. All right, everybody, I'm going to bring her on. Lindsay Boylan, everybody. Did I let you in? I think I did. Oh, yeah, here it comes.
Hello.
Lindsay! Hi!
Hello.
Welcome to Woman Crush Wednesdays.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing? You're so busy.
Oh my God, it's one of those decades.
Yeah, that's good, right?
It's crazy. You're the same way, right? You know us. You know what this is like.
Well, it's funny because during the pandemic, it's better for me being able to just do yoga in the living room and then come on and do this and not have to run around everywhere.
Oh yeah. It is not. That is nice, but I have a natural, my energy is fills to the level of what I'm doing. So if I have a new challenge, I'm like, let me just fill up the room to respond to that. So
you got to manage it better. Do you do yoga?
I do yoga. I do
yoga.
Yoga
helps a lot.
It does help. So does meditation. I have I try to have some calm at the end of the day. I put little Etsy paintings that I purchased near me so I can be reminded of calmer things, because politics isn't that calm.
No, politics is not calm, but right now is a very good time for change.
Yes, we have to have change. We need so much change. We need it, right?
Yes. And I want to get into everything, but I always have everybody explain their background a little bit themselves. Because I don't like to say it. I'd rather you say it, because then it reminds you of what you're doing. It just, there's something to that. So tell everybody, so you're running for Manhattan Borough President right now.
Yes, I'm running for Manhattan Borough President. It's kind of like Mayor of Manhattan, I'd say, and it's all about it's all about land use, zoning, and community boards. So the decisions we make in the landscape. So the decisions we make about the city we want to build. So it's cool.
All right, well, just so you know, a little insight.
Yes.
You've seen what I wrote all about CBS all over Twitter and everything, right?
Yes, a little bit.
Well, I never gave them my script. My script is all about everything that everything that you stand for, just so you know. That's why they tried to steal it, because it was such a brilliant idea, and it's becoming even more relevant now than it was even before. So holding on to it was brilliant. So
I feel like every day there's a new story, there's a new like unfolding of the world, like as it's existed, especially for women, you know, the things we face.
Yes.
Every day are like,
yes,
I can't believe that's been happening forever, you know?
What about that guy? I forget who it was. He was a journalist, and there was a reporter, and he sent her 68 dick pics.
Oh my God.
Did you see that story?
I did not see that.
He sent her 68 dick pics. 68. And she ended up leaving her career because of it. We talked about that on the last Women Crush Wednesday. But I like talking about the nuances of what happens as a woman while we're working. And I like to talk about what you're doing. So Manhattan Borough President is essentially like running for mayor of Manhattan, not of all of New York City, just Manhattan.
Yeah. And in a time where we got a lot of challenges, like right now, it matters all the decisions we make about how we build more housing, how we invest in public spaces, how we help the city recover, especially the central business district of Manhattan. So it's a really exciting time to be trying to fight for New York. And it feels like when you're going through something, to be able to do something positive with that energy is you know, there's nothing better. There's nothing better.
And do you feel like, because I know for myself, when there's nothing really outside pushing you, it's a great time to be a disruptor, to come in and disrupt everything. But it's also, there's no real feedback. You kind of just have to pull it out from inside of yourself. That's at least how I feel. Is that how you're feeling?
Yes. And you know, I don't know if it's me getting old now or what it is, but I always in my career, I would look at it like, okay, well, she's done something along these lines, and I can, you know, kind of riff off of that and do something different. But now I'm at a place where you're on the diving board and you think, oh my gosh, I might be the first one who tries to talk about my lived experiences in the middle of a campaign and keep going. Oh my God, maybe women's lives don't have to be destroyed when we talk about the reality of what we experienced in the workplace. And, you know, without going into it too much, you're like, I didn't realize I was doing something new. And then I try to think of, okay, let's bring my great women examples, because I always need them. They need me up. They lift me up. Women lift me up, you know, to keep going. And I'm like, wait, I don't know if we've got some examples here. And, you know, and then you start to reflect. I mean, I was like, you know, not to go into it, but I was like, when was the first time, because your questionnaire kind of made me think of it. When was the first time I was sexually harassed at work? And I remember being in my 20s managing Bryant Park, and one of the senior employees who had a daughter my age walked behind me and stuck his hand in my ass pants pocket and squeezed my butt. And I didn't even know to be enraged. I was just like, what? And, you know, you have these experiences, and then you communicate it to your boss, and he kind of laughs. And then the experience and your acceptance of the culture builds from there, you know, and not to go in that direction, but your questions about like, what was my experience like in the workplace or my life? It's, you know, you kind of, I listened to someone say something like, in the first 30 years of your life, you learn a lot, and the next 30 years of your life, I do feel as though, you know, unlearning some of the bad messages I had to absorb to make it work in my career and my life.
Okay, so I want to go back. So I always find the connection. So you're saying like, oh, not to go down that road, or the first time you were sexually harassed. I found that interesting, because a lot of times what what people, the way I keep talking about how things keep getting imprinted on the world. They
Yeah.
become our reality. They become the reinforcement of what becomes reality. So if you want to talk about that in terms of a building, or you want to talk about that in terms of building your career. So the two of them go together. You need your reinforcement, you need your facade, you need all the building to build the buildings. But also what you just said about, so the guy put his hand down your pants. You were in shock. It's usually shocking to anybody. There's usually authority figures. And then you go to your boss who's a man, and then they reinforce it. So then that becomes your reality. He reinforces it by laughing. So you're already embarrassed and ashamed, and then they laugh, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that was my sense of the framing of the world, was some random ass dude can squeeze my ass in an office, and that's it. That's all that happens. I still see that guy occasionally. He still works there. You know, it's
funny you saying that, because first of all, there was a guy when I was hosting at Gotham Comedy Club, I was in the sound booth, and the guy I had known forever, and we were both watching the show, and he reached over and he grabbed my ass, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I wanted to do that for a long time."
Oh
I was like, "Well, you can't." And then when I did Mark Maron's WTF, I said to him, I said, "They've taken my money, they've grabbed my ass," and he goes, "Have you ever been assaulted?" And I had to stop and pause and say, grabbing my ass is assaulting me.
Yeah. But
he didn't even know that.
You frame it within the level of like, okay, this is in my frame of acceptable because it was so acceptable to everyone around me. Like, and crazy, right?
And you're trying to work, and they're attacking your body, right?
Yeah. I mean, we all are cultured to, for me, it was like, how do I be as conservative as possible? And I just think, what would it be like to just not have those cultural markers or references when you wake up in the morning? Like, what would it be like to just, I remember, and this is unfortunate, like there was one guy that was a really nice guy that I had a lot of resentment towards. And I couldn't quite figure it out because he was always nice to me. And it was because we had very similar career paths, but he didn't, in my view, he didn't have the added burden of being sexually harassed while doing it. And I resented that. And, I think I should apologize probably to him at some point, because I couldn't figure out why. He was completely nice to me. And I was really resentful that he didn't have this added burden of that. And I wonder a lot, that's the kind of stuff women carry. And fuck if I allow my daughter to have to carry that when she's our age. I just refuse to have her carry that. And she just won't. And if it means we're out here in like a giant inner tube in a vintage shop breaking all of the vases, then I guess that's what it is. Well,
that's what this time is forcing us to do. That we are the people that are going to do that. We have no choice. We just have to do it. We've been born at a time that this is what's going to happen. We have to do for
it's
all
that
the women.
last piece, or else we're never going to come. It's never going to come to completion, because it's all these things that are kind of on the margins, but they're so insidious because they're on the margins that you don't say anything. And because it's small,
you cut out.
You can't think about the thing, and it's just, I saw really quickly, Cicely Tyson, who passed away, that amazing actress, she passed away last week. And I saw a clip of her talking about when she went to acting school in New York, and she was so excited because she was so passionate about this field of acting. And she went into the class, and there was this incredibly well-known acting coach that everyone respected. And he said, "Come talk to me after class." And he basically propositioned her, and I think he tried to kiss her or something. And she was, in her 80s, reliving something from like 50 years before that. And she was crying because she had never really allowed herself to absorb how much it hurt to not be taken seriously, or be taken seriously, but be viewed as a tool at the same time. And that really touched me. But I back talk about my experience, you know, like I speak out, and seeing that she would still be tearing up about it at 80 or something, you know, like, what the fuck? We shouldn't have to carry these things. And I understand there's so many levels of privilege. I'm a white woman and I get that. I just mean people shouldn't have to carry added weight on their shoulder because of someone else's power and influence over them. You know?
And also your body
right?
will. No, and your body physically shuts down. Like when somebody grabs your ass like that at work, you shut down a piece of you shut it down. And then, especially I'm creative. So if I'm having to shut down pieces of myself to be able to be creative, then I'm going to lose a lot of my creativity and my job is going to suffer from that.
Yes. Absolutely. You just can't, you know, you're in a tunnel vision.
And you shut down a little bit more. I've had plenty of girls, like if I wear short shorts, girls will say to me, Sue, or women will say to me, Sue, I can't believe you have the guts to wear those. And I'm like, oh my gosh. They're afraid that if they wear short, that somebody will grab them. If they wear a skirt, somebody will grab them. Like I'm having this conversation. And I also like what you said about having the resentment against the guy. Because I think that's a conversation that helps us flesh it out too. Which I think is funny. Women will admit to being resentful, but guys won't admit that they're sexually harassing people. We're also always like, we'll always take our part. We're like, all right, we'll even take our part.
We do. And I, you know, I'd rather be able to learn from my mistakes or shortcomings. I would rather be that person. What's that like meme going around where it is like, men will do blank instead of going to therapy? Like, I would rather be, and obviously there are a lot of generalizations here, but I would rather be able to say, hey, you know, like I was resentful because you didn't have to be sexually harassed to, you know, get to the same place in your career as I did. And we were, you know, basically competitors, and you weren't getting the moves put on you.
But I think it's, so then guys can understand, I say this a lot on the show, is that there are men who have been like predators and power hungry. And then there's men that haven't been, but it was hard for the men who hadn't been to understand it, because they couldn't wrap their brains around the fact that a man would ruin his business just to hurt a woman. So it was easier to say the woman must be crazy because they couldn't understand it. But this conversation,
you know, I see the crazy trope, but you know what I see more than that now is the you're nobody, you're nothing trope. And, you know, my therapist, and I love to talk about therapy because I think mental health is so healthy, amazing, right?
Yes, good, do it. Yeah, I love it. I went for like 14 years, maybe 16, maybe 20 years.
Helpful.
Yeah.
So my therapist is always like, you know, instead of getting angry, why don't you be curious about that? And so, you know, when people start to be like, you're nobody, you're nothing, blah, 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 you know, I'm like, that's fascinating. They follow my account on Twitter so that they can hate message me about being nothing. And that's fascinating. You know, that's a fascinating, what is that communicating? And, you know, they need to feel like I'm nobody. And why are they following me? To tell me that they want me to feel like nobody because I've communicated that I had a painful experience with my powerful boss. And that's fascinating. There's a lot to solve there, isn't there? I mean, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about this. We talk about moms. We can talk about everything. You had all this great questionnaire. I'm good with anything.
Well, I love getting it going, but I want to talk about that, about the idea of you're nothing. There's something, I mean, there's been movie posters, the way that they advertise movies, they'll put the male lead will have his full body and the female lead will only be a part of herself.
Yes.
So that's objectifying.
She's leaning around or, yeah.
So there's always been this disappearing women's power everywhere in the media and And so it's not surprising. And also there's the mechanism that I talked about on Zoo TV earlier or yesterday about how the oppressed they'll push the person down who's speaking up, A, because they've done something wrong, but B, because they want to protect the abuser. The abuser gets away clean because the other people will do the dirty work for them.
Always. Yeah, always. I'm moving to the other room because, as always, my phone is dying, so I have to get the charger. So
Okay, good. I hope the internet might be better because you were cutting out a little bit over there. So I hope it's safe.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I will.
Okay, good.
I'll try in this room.
All right, good. So I want to get into the housing because I'm obsessed. Okay, so far from what I've read about New York, so the real estate, I'm fascinated with how are people going to go back to work? What's going to happen with all the real estate in Manhattan, and also.
Yes.
And so you said the business district, you're trying to figure out how to revitalize that. And also I read where the hotels, they were talking about doing, possibly doing a transforming them into affordable housing. But there was something about the way they were built that they couldn't have family, like more than 2 family dwellings in it. Or do you know anything? Can you inform us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation around Midtown, and, people, even after this crisis, aren't necessarily going to work in the same level in congregate spaces, like on a trading floor, in an open work plan, like a bullpen or all of that. And I think that's true. And so there is a real opportunity to think about use, and what do we make residential, or how do we transform some hotels that may not have. There was really an explosion in terms of a number of hotels that were built in New York in the last, I would say, decade or so. And similar, I mean, and not exactly the same way, but similar to after 9/11 in Lower Manhattan, we're going to need to rezone and create more opportunities for flexibility with space. And I think what you're zeroing in on is, what kind of spaces and how can they be transformed? Like, there has been in the past a big battle against things called SROs, basically, particularly something that was popular at the turn of the last century, where you would have a shared restroom and you just have a private boarding space, right? And it was a great way for people to get affordable, cheap housing in New York. And then there was a big move to kind of end that practice. And I think there's a place for it. I think there's a real place for getting a foothold in New York City. I mean, I remember when I moved 8 times in 10 years in New York when I moved here. And I paid my first apartment alone, and it wasn't alone. I found my roommate on Craigslist. She didn't speak English. I actually still don't remember her name. She was very nice. I didn't have a room. I had I was in the living room, and there was a bed sheet that was my wall. And when she would pass by it to her room, that my wall would shake. And that was amazing because I was able to come to New York City. I was in Manhattan, so I didn't care. I was safe, and I was near the 86th Street subway stop. And so how do we provide, we have a real need for a lot more, not just affordable housing, but deeply affordable housing, senior housing. We aren't doing at all a good enough job to providing enough housing that people can actually afford unless you're a multimillionaire. And we need to do more of that. And this crisis, as is often the case, will be, in some respects, an opportunity to change that.
Okay, I know somebody just asked, do they have rent control in New York City? I know they do. I'm not completely familiar with what happened up until we had the pandemic, but I know that a lot of the rent control, a lot of the people had been pushed out of the city, a lot of the gentrification started happening, and so now it seems like they didn't have a plan B for humanity. So now that seems like you have to flip the whole thing now. It seems like everything that was building has now completely disappeared. Is that correct?
So we still have legacy rent control and rent stabilization, which are 2 different programs. And then we have affordable housing. But if you look at what we had in terms of housing support in some way, shape, or form in the 1950s versus now, a much larger percentage of people got help living in New York City because it was not affordable, and got help making it into the middle class through that. And we need to go back to that time, not that time period, not the exact way that we did it, but we're going to have to do a lot more for people. And we have to reset the relationship with real estate. I mean, I've been kind of shocked the extent to which big real estate controls the political process in the city. I was engaged in state politics, and then I ran for Congress, so federal. I had not seen kind of the extent to which the power brokers of New York City really are real estate and politics. And to your point, this crisis has dramatically reshaped everything we know about our city in a lot of ways. And I think this is one relationship that has to change.
It seems like there's a lot of leverage. It seems like there's a lot of leverage because they don't have the power as much now because they don't have their employees and they're going to want to unload a lot of the real estate. So it seems like there's leverage to go in. Am I correct in assuming that?
There's that. And there's also the dynamic that, you know, we don't want everyone to fail because there are a lot of, like, let's say, you know, you're a retiree and you bought your apartment and now you live in senior housing and you rent out your apartment, or you, like, you know, a lot of people who are basically small businesses. We don't want everyone to fail because that just means that big real estate firms will scoop up at fire sales what, you know, smaller families have done. So the challenge.
Hold on, can you just go back on that for one more second? So
Yeah.
You're saying that the people that live in retirement homes are renting out their apartments and you're considering that a small business. Is that what you're saying?
I was giving one example of that. I think it's
Okay.
a little more complicated, but
Okay.
but yes, basically, not all real estate is the same. Like Hudson Yards isn't the same as a family that's had a building in Chinatown for 3 generations, and that's what 3, you know, relatives, 3 siblings are all betting their retirement on, this one building, right?
Okay,
So
good, yeah.
just drawing a distinction between different kind of mechanisms in the city. And I think we have to rethink how we develop. Like, for instance, the way we used to get and still do affordable housing in this city is through something, and it's going to sound super wonky, so we won't dwell on it, but something called mandatory inclusionary housing, which basically means, hey, let's build a big luxury tower and we'll give you, let's say 100 apartments that are affordable in there so that we can get this giant tower. And that's how our mayor and our city council approached affordable housing development. So you can see immediately you're basically baking into the cake more gentrification, right? Because it's a luxury tower with some affordable. So you're basically, you know, if you get what, I don't know, 10% less than affordable housing, well, more than 10% of our demographics need affordable housing. So you're basically recreating gentrification and displacement. So this,
and you're also putting people in a situation where the discrepancy, the wealth discrepancy is ridiculous, and the treatment probably isn't going to be the same, right?
Huge.
So you're setting up the system, yeah.
Also, in this moment in time, you have, you know, the wealthiest people who've debunked to somewhere else, and so you have people who live in New York and who are never going anywhere, and then you have people that we're still basically building for who aren't here. If I look outside my apartment in West Chelsea, none of the lights are on right now besides my building because they're all these, like, you know, big luxury buildings. And so you can see why people who are New Yorkers are mad because they say, hey, why, you know, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. Why aren't you making things work for me and my family? Why aren't you building more housing that can accommodate my grandchildren? Because I live in NYCHA, but the next generation can't because it's just not affordable to live here. And yet you have all of these empty luxury buildings. That's very clear right now.
Okay, so that's interesting to me. So as you're saying that, I'm thinking back to my big problem with Cuomo when he had his press conferences. He had Chris Rock and Rosie Perez on, and I was like, why don't you have the workers on? The workers are the ones that are going to save Manhattan. The workers are the ones on the subway saving Manhattan. Why are we not dealing with the workers? You're essentially saying the same thing about the housing. Why aren't they dealing with the people who are going to stay in New York forever that can't go anywhere else?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the right point. I mean, it just so often, you know, things are not built for the people who have to live here in mind. You know, it's just not how it's built. I'm sitting on the floor. My husband's like, you're like a little cat. Like, where are you? All
right, I want to ask you another question.
Not bad Wi-Fi and enough power so I can charge my phone. I'm forever going to be like some girl in her 20s that, like, still needs to charge her phone because it's dying.
Yeah, well, you're doing so much all day. I totally understand. All right, now I want to ask you something. This thing that I've been noticing over the years before the pandemic even happened, this Section 8 thing, where the people are taking advantage of the fact. Now, my friend Viva Van Luke, she did a documentary with what's his name, Nick Kristoff from the New York Times. It's
Yeah,
called
oh,
Tightrope.
he's brilliant, brilliant.
The documentary is amazing, and he followed a woman who was a black woman who was a grandmother who was a manager. You know how everybody always says, like, get a job, get a job. She was a manager. She was
Yes.
like a high level manager in her supermarket or wherever she worked. And in the community, the landlords raised the rent like $600.
Yeah.
Like made it impossible for her to pay this to rate. That raise was crazy. And so she ended up in one motel room with her entire family. But what was behind that, which I noticed while I was watching the documentary, is that they were taking advantage of this Section 8. And I was in Florida with a woman one time, and the real estate woman came. They were buying a house, and I picked up on what they were doing. What they do is they take advantage of the Section 8. They get the people in, and they take the security deposits. The government supplements the security deposits.
Yeah.
They know that
Yeah.
the people aren't going to be able to sustain it financially, and so they keep turning it over. So they're exploiting this Section 8 thing,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's what was going on with this motel. So is that happening in Manhattan? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of problems with Section 8. So it's good in that it gives you basically funding so you can afford to live somewhere that you can't afford. But one of the biggest problems is it, in many cases, especially in a place like New York, doesn't get you access to, some place that you can live in, first of all. And there's a years-long waiting list to even get Section 8 housing vouchers. So I remember when I was the Secretary for Economic Development, I oversaw HDR, which is our housing agency our housing umbrella for the state. And we had Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and New York and Puerto Rico are closely intertwined because our populations share, so many family ties. And we were helping, and the governor said, get people in line for Section 8 housing who are coming from Puerto Rico to see family in New York. And I said, we can do that, but you'll be cutting people in line who are waiting for years who qualify, like single moms and their kids. People are waiting for years who qualify, and they can't get access even though they qualify. Like, what kind of a country doesn't give a family in need who has affirmed that they qualify for the support, doesn't give it to them? That's the baseline problem.
It's so funny because Allison from Boston, and she had messaged me before that she was so excited about this conversation, and she mentioned that. She said that there's people now in Boston skipping the line for all the people that have been waiting. So where does it, so I always go back to the leverage. So the leverage, that's the only way that anything can move forward is if there's leverage. Like I said, the hotels, they're going to have to do something. They're going to want to give up something, but they're going to want to get something from the government in order to do what they're going to do. So the same idea goes with this. Okay, so they want to what? They want to help people that are disadvantaged, but how do we not knock out the people that have been waiting? There has to be some middle ground. There has to be some mediation, some leverage that goes on in the middle there, right? Because it can't be all or nothing. If they need people to have, because the housing, we should not have a housing crisis to begin with. LA, they just said LA is going to go up, I think, 84% over the next 2 years with the homelessness situation. I don't understand where the money's going. In LA, they raise billions and billions of dollars for affordable housing, and then now it's going to go up 84%.
I think one of the things that's most alarming to me, and I think there's this great kind of, not great, but we had a community issue in New York. It's called the Lucerne Hotel, where
yes, I was just going to ask you about that.
where a group of men who were during a pandemic staying in a congregate shelter for their own safety, for community safety, groups had been moved into hotels to become more safe during a pandemic. And it became a huge community issue on the Upper West Side because there was a lot of fear mongering and fear in some parts of the community of men experiencing homelessness living in a relatively speaking well-to-do area. And then there were other parts of the community that really embraced these men, and that created some of the press around it. But and I've been very supportive of men living there and the fact that they should stay in the community simply because it makes someone uncomfortable. But one of the things that has become really obvious to me in talking with some of the men, and particularly one of the really prominent leaders, Shams, he calls himself the homeless hero, so he's really reclaimed that name, is that we spend a ton of money on the issues around homelessness and all the services, but they don't end up collectively being, helpful to people experiencing homelessness. So our system isn't working, and I don't have enough. I never want to legislate or be in a city that I'm not, so I don't know LA's issues, but I know we're spending a lot of money not solving the problem.
Yeah.
And it's a deeply disempowering experience for people experiencing homelessness, instead of finding ways to have policy solutions and support that are empowering whenever possible.
It has to be longevity. There has to be sustainability to it. You can't just throw money at a problem.
Stability. Can you imagine wondering every week if a lawsuit is going to mean that you are no longer welcome in a community's hotel during a pandemic? I mean, that in itself is traumatic, right?
Well, that kind of stuff, I've always been fascinated with this. I've played golf with Ken Langone up in North Carolina, and the golf course where he played. I went to the 4th of July party with him. But at the same time, we drove by the gas station, and there were Latino men sitting in the gas station. And I was like, oh, these guys are all supposed to be Republicans, but the Latino, probably undocumented men are sitting there waiting to get picked up, probably by these people. And then we went to get an ice cream, and everybody was together waiting in line at the ice cream because everybody lives in the same place. The workers that were there and the people from the country club. And I'm like, and in Nantucket, the same thing happens. In Nantucket, I remember there was a big issue where they were building a housing for the workers because people need to work on Nantucket during the summer. Yeah. And there was a big argument about who was going to have them live beside them.
Yes. Yeah. It's, I grew up originally, so my dad's a Marine, or was a Marine, and I grew up in San Diego, so a border town, and there's such deep racism, deep xenophobia, and deep distaste. Oh, well, that's not, we shouldn't do this. There's such deep racism in so many communities. And I lived on the border, and at the same time, you had really communities that really did depend on each other, and yet you had such deep racism and ignorance and xenophobia at the same time. And I think you see it all over our country. I think it's part of what we're battling now, right? Like issues around misogyny and sexism, issues of broader xenophobia. The thing I would say that's positive, if I could put a positive spin on it, is we don't get anywhere positive by ignoring these last frontiers. I wouldn't say last, but we're never going to advance if we don't get past the deep sub rosa of misogyny and of all of the hate, and if we don't contend with our history, things like
and the wealth gap and the being better than, and because I feel like everybody tries to be better than it trickles down. And you want to talk about trickle down economy? It's trickles down. I'm better than you. I'm better than you. I'm better than you. I'm better than you. And you can't be near me. And through, it's my feeling that we have to be uncomfortable. We're going to have to be uncomfortable. But I've been seeing it happen over the years. My friend is a very wealthy. She lives on the side of a mountain in North Carolina. And one day somebody rang the doorbell. And it was, she has a huge driveway, a mile long, where there's no people anywhere. And it was somebody who used to work for her, and he was on opioids. And he rang the doorbell, and I thought, oh, something's really happening if this is crossing. And in LA, there's a lot of homeless people in the front of buildings, and they're going to the bathroom everywhere. It's it's starting to cross over, so you can't keep it at bay anymore. Humanity's right in our face.
Well, I think, the one thing I would say is, not the one thing, but there was this deep political religion on, cutting down social services and, privatizing our social safety net and reducing the social safety net. And it really took hold around Reaganomics, but the Clinton era really put it into play.
Can you tell me what the benefit of privatizing our social is? Because I'm very fascinated with the whole private prison system.
There has been this broader movement. I think the most well-known or obvious example is the private sector of the defense industry. So we privatized a lot of our service and a lot of the work we do abroad. And then that's been replicated in a lot of ways in state prisons across the country. You see it in all sorts of services to cost cut. But at the same time, you don't have the same accountability in the private sector. You don't elect the CEO of Halliburton. You don't elect the CEO of Arizona's private prison system. I mean, indirectly, you can voice concerns about it, but they're not culpable. And at the end of the day, that privatization that really took place in part under Reagan, and that's why there's this kind of like great love affair with him on the Republican side, didn't just end with Republicans. We had, especially under Clinton, which was the first president that I was really aware of in my youth, that I had a tremendous amount of respect for, because I was a big fan of Hillary Clinton at the time, and I still respect her a lot. But he cut down the welfare system and the social safety net, and really impressed upon all these provisions of work that didn't necessarily, and the crime bill was in part carried by Democrats. So it's not.
Are you talking about pick yourself up by the bootstraps? That theory? Like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Saying, hey, you can't do this with our help. We're not going to help you. And that kind of religion and ethos of the Democratic Party is also coming to bear now in the reality of the world we have. And it hasn't all been positive. A lot of it's been negative, in fact. And I think that is part of what has been really powerful. And there's so much resentment, I think, especially from certain generations, because they say, wait a second, I didn't sign up for the Iraq war. I didn't buy into the bullshit of nuclear weapons in Iraq, or, I didn't think Colin Powell or any of these folks were telling the truth about weapons of mass destruction. I didn't, please don't put my generation on the hook, but my generation is on the hook, even though we didn't choose these people. And then,
well, that's the same thing as the women. Like, we can't say, oh, those women, we have to do it for the women. We might have been, my generation was more abused than the women that have come before me. But if I don't do it, then I'm going to be just as guilty as that. Somebody has to say, all right, I'll do it. And that's right how I started the show, saying we have to just do it. It's the world and being in reality. And you want to talk about accountability. It's like somebody has to do something.
Yes. Yeah. And I think a great example of, and I do think impeaching the president and the procedure has been important today, I think, because it's important to tell the truth about what happens. It does matter in my mind. But the fact that we can't get on the same page about stimulus checks to people.
It's so funny. Everything you say, I'm already thinking. I'm like, I hear what you're saying about the impeachment. But why? But is it a distraction from the stimulus? What is going on? What is it a distraction from the stimulus? Because.
Yeah, I can see how people would think that, but I do think it's really important to in an era where fabricating, what do they say, like manufacturing consent and truth is very much a real problem. QAnon, like the things that are fake are made to be real. It's important to discern what is true and what is real. And I think more than punishment, it's about accountability and truth telling. And I do think that's important, because we saw, in some of the footage and some of the conversation today, that Pence and Mitt Romney were pretty close to, being killed, being murdered in this process. And I think that is, the people who should be closest to shock are the Republicans. Of course, they don't seem to be shocked by a lot, but
and whenever I understand that those are your views. I always do the mediator. Like, I always go right through the middle, because I always go, okay. So I think about the welfare thing, and I think, okay, it has to be somewhere in the middle, because there is the argument that welfare gets exploited, and it takes away drive. It takes away.
Sure.
So there is that. So I mean, and the same thing with the accountability and the truth. I would have to say it to that same thing. I hear what you're saying, but to that same point, Biden said $2,000. and then he got elected, and then he said $1,400,
Oh, it's
and then
bullshit.
the money still isn't here. So
It's
the
bullshit.
same thing should be held in both places.
Yes, it's bullshit. It's total bullshit. That's what I began with. It's and this need to kind of say, well, you got $600 and now you're going to get $1,400. It's just, no one wants to hear an explanation as to why they're not getting the help they need, and means testing it and giving it to people who, trying to give it to people who need $50,000 or less. A lot more people than that need help deeply, really need help. And
Well, also there's a dereliction of duty going on across the board, because I don't understand. I said today, why isn't there somebody coming on the TV? We were in a disaster. Why didn't we have a leader coming on the TV, no matter who it was, saying, helping people, comforting people?
Yes.
Making them feel bad. Like, why is everybody so agitated right now? Because they just went through a horrific election where they've been divided. We went through 2 huge protests. We went through, violence. The media, mixed messages on the media, and now everybody's kind of just left with an open wound right now.
It's true. I do think that Joe Biden is trying to do that. And I hope that makes some people feel better. It didn't resonate with me, because I think a message of unity doesn't resonate when you're not able to put food on the table for people. And I'm not saying that's me, but that's what I'm thinking of. Or you fear for your life, which I think a lot of people do. So I think accountability matters, and I don't think we're there yet at all.
No, it's the division in the country. It's the way that we got divided that needs to, you're right, and this broad sweeping unity and it goes back to what we were just talking about the housing, about having actual sustainability, about actually helping people, not just giving lip service. It's across the board. People need to be heard. I feel like it just swings. It's like, we're all right, we're all right. We're all the right, we're all right. Instead of going down the middle somewhere and saying, okay, what's your side? Okay, what's your side? Here's I always say the hard numbers. Like, these are the hard numbers. This is really what's happening here. How do we make it happen? And even if people weren't happy with the decision, they would feel respected that they knew the truth. I feel like people feel very disrespected right now because there's no transparency, and they feel completely screwed over on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, yes. And I think they have a real reason to feel that way. I'm always engaged in a lot of conversations, as a politician, and I guess I am one. But about like, oh, what do people need to know about politics? I'm not someone who thinks that everyone has to live their lives in politics. Like, you shouldn't have to know your representative in order for government to work for you. And it's a really scary time when that is the truth. And I do think that is the truth. Like, if you needed a small business loan to stay afloat during this time, it would have been a lot easier to get access to that if you knew people. And obviously that these are inherent struggles in this country and in the world. But you shouldn't have to know deeply how the system works for it to work for you. Like, that's a bad sign.
And that leads to the lack of transparency. I mean, you talked about in the 50s that the housing helped the people go to the middle classes. There's no changing your class in this country because there's no transparency, because people don't know where the loans are. All the rich people took the loans that were supposed to be for the small businesses. Comedians can't work right now. And then they're stealing Ted Alexander's joke on NBC, on Saturday Night Live. It's like, and then SAG, after the union that I'm in, the way that they measure our health insurance is by how much we work, and then we couldn't work, and then they raise the premiums. It's like, it's when the system is bullshit. Yes, it's set up to go against your own best interest. Yes,
I do feel like, and it's very strange. So my mom's mother was from Medford, Massachusetts, and
Medford.
And my mom had my sister at 16, was on food stamps, dropped out of high school to have my sister. And, she's come such a long way, and my sister has as well. but like I got to go all the way, and I got to do all the things that everyone else didn't, and I got to basically like shift classes, and I was like, I try to think about like how that happened, when it happened, why it happened, you know, how it what does it mean, and I think it, you know, when I got to go to Wellesley, it was like such a big sign for everyone in my family. My mom was like, oh my God, you know, like it was this great thing, and that no one else in my family got access to. And I think the structures of class in this country are really problematic, and it's actually getting harder.
Well, you just talked about the education system. Now people
Yes.
young people can't even go to college because it costs too much. They can't get a
Yeah.
job to back it up.
Yeah.
So the system is set up to fuck everybody over, to make
Yes.
themselves fuck themselves. And
Yes.
you just said about how, about how we should not have to worry about who our politics. You guys should be able to do if we elect you.
About it.
It's the same way I feel about the middle class. The middle class, a lot of people don't want to be rich. A lot of people don't want to own their businesses. The way the country used to be set up is that you were either born into money, or capitalism, free enterprise let you big risk. What do they say? Tom Brady says, no risk it, no biscuit, right? You take a big risk, you get a big reward, right? That's how you were able to transcend if you want to. There's a lot of people that don't want to transcend. There were a lot of people that were very happy going to work, making a good living, that they could feed themselves and take care of themselves and spend a little extra money on whatever you were manipulating with your advertising, or go to Disney World. But going to Disney World now, people can't even afford it. So
honestly, that is beyond ridiculous, crazy, like expensive. That is like, it's insane. And I shouldn't use the word insane. All these terms I should really retire. But yeah, you go to Disney and you're like, this is a fortune. How do you do this? You know, it's just unbelievable.
Because it's turned into extractive capitalism, and it's not working anymore. That's what gets me. If it was still working for all these really wealthy people, like if it wasn't, if the homeless people weren't sitting outside of their house, like I've been saying this for years, I'm like, you guys, I'm like, what are there going to be, 4 rich people and everybody else is going to be lying dead in the streets? I'm like, it's not working. We need to have some sort of readjustment, reset. Since this pandemic, you'd think that they would have a plan B for humanity. They're not. Nobody's doing it. There's no even a tiny bit of like, just a tiny bit of change to care about human beings, because they're so terrified that people are going to rise up because they've been oppressing people for so long. And I kept saying they got too greedy. They should have let the middle class alone. They should have just kept clipping whatever they were clipping and given them enough money to live. But now I've said they keep taking from people. Eventually, they're going to make people so angry they are going to rise up. If you're playing games with $600 or $1,400 in a pandemic that's coming up on a year,
it's very let them eat cake. It feels like it's beyond ridiculous. It really is, that we're playing games. And by the way, like the $2,000 for the people who really need it, we're talking about like what people need is emergency UBI. They need these checks monthly. They don't need to fight about getting like a puzzle piece to $2,000. They need ongoing assistance, because if you don't have money for rent now, you're not going to have money for 3 times rent 3 months from now. Like, make it make sense. None of it makes sense. And you know, we're not even at that point yet where we're acknowledging the economic crisis.
Because they're still stuck. They're still stuck in the extractive capitalism. I mean, when Cuomo had those press conferences and he didn't have a worker on the panel with him, I was like, what are you doing? This is not celebrity anymore.
No.
He got a book deal.
I can't even.
It's going to get bad. It's going to get bad until everybody starts standing up.
Honestly, politics should never be about politicians. Like, it should be, and I know this sounds altruistic and maybe, you know, a little bit too much, but we could use some altruism. Like, we could use some people who uplift others instead of themselves. And
I think people are going to be ready for it. I don't know if people were ready for it before. I don't think they could hear it. I don't think that the positivity, the distrust, I think it's going to hurt so badly that eventually people are going to do it just purely because they're going to, it's almost like what I understand to be what happens with a drug addict.
Yeah.
They won't get help until it's so, they won't receive it because they don't trust it. They don't think they deserve it. They want to keep doing it their way. Yeah. That's what I see. I see us going into this crash, careening into this crash of like just an economic mess that something radical is going to have to come in to fix it. People will finally be okay with it.
It's true because, you know, we're not even seeing, just even in New York alone, we're not seeing reflected in real numbers, in my view, even the real estate side of the depression here. We're not seeing real numbers, you know, really nowhere, but the debt levels of even our major institutions, colleges and universities, utilities, transit systems, state governments, regionally speaking, not just New York, we're not seeing the level of, I mean, I don't want to talk about write-downs. We're not even there, even the way that private real estate works. People are trying to put on a good face.
Yeah, it's a shell game. They're moving, and eventually it's going to collapse. But then the SROs are going to come back. Then they are going to be open to it. And I said this on my Mark Maron podcast a couple of years ago. I said, we're on the verge of a spiritual revolution. I had no idea what I was talking about. And now as we keep moving forward, I'm like, we're on the verge of something where people are going to do something that they've never done before in terms of altruism, in terms of being more humane. I think it's the way we're going to save humanity because the old system is
an amazing outcome. I think that would be an amazing outcome. I do say, so when I came out of college and I got into this field of urban planning, no one was, I mean, not no one, but there weren't a lot of people interested in it. And now they're like, oh, urban planning is so sexy, blah, 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 blah. I was like, it was, it was not sexy when I got into it. It was like a super nerd girl thing, or person thing. And, that tells me that more people, not more people, but people are really focused around their impact on the world, the impact of their lifestyle on the world, and the impact of how, you know, interconnection, what it means, which is related to climate.
Which brings me back to what I was saying about how now during the pandemic, everything's taken away and that we have to pull in from ourselves and like create what we're creating. We will be the people that people will look to because I'm creating my TV network. You're running for office. You're building affordable housing. You don't have any, it's like doing it in a vacuum right now, but eventually it's going to flip and people are going to go, oh, that's it. That's what we need to do. And so it's very, like you said, it's very powerful to have to do it, pull it out from inside, but we're women. We went in and saved the men during the war. We went in and got them more money and then we left. This time we're not leaving. This time we're not leaving.
I know. Like, I don't know. Did you love that movie, like A League of Their Own?
Yes.
Like we did the baseball and then we just were like, here, take it back. It's yours. Like, come on.
You know but we've done it. If you look at every women's movement, we've gone up, then we've gone down, then we've gone up, then we've gone down. I mean, even I was watching something last night and I'm like, there's all women here. These women are all
I have like an old printout. Like, this is the kind of stuff I collect, is all these old women's movement stuff. Anyways, you were going on.
Well, I just think that because we kept getting pushed back down. That's what happened. We just kept getting pushed back down and we didn't organize correctly. But now there's no stopping us because there's nothing. They're screwing themselves. The old system, the patriarchy, they're taking themselves down. I kept saying it with CBS. I'm like, you guys, you're going to fuck yourself. You fucking ego is going to take yourself down. And they're just careening. The ego's careen. They can't course correct.
I mean, how many men can't not abuse their power right now? I mean, it's not a majority. It's just the loud ones. But especially in media and politics, you hear about it a lot. You know, you hear about it more. You know,
the way the guys talk to me with my CBS thing, they would like talk to me like I was a fucking idiot. I fucking hung up on them. Then they'd call me back. They couldn't believe I hung up on them. I'm like, I'm not doing this shit anymore. I don't care. You're not that powerful anymore. No, GameStop, what GameStop did with Wall Street, what's going on with Ted Alexandro, with NBC, with Saturday Night Live stealing his joke. I'm like, I'm watching it all. It's all changing and they can't hold it down anymore. they're better off to flip. But it's like, I went out with a guy one time. He told me, he's like, Sue, I would ruin my whole life before I would admit I was wrong. Or before I would say I was sorry.
He didn't say that. No, he didn't say that.
Yes, he did.
Did he really say that? That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
He said it right to me. He was very honest.
That's amazing.
All right, I want to get to some of the questions before we finish, because I do feel like women, we're going to come in and we're going to be the ones that everybody looks at eventually, because we've already taken so much shit. This is nothing for us. We're like, we've been through so much. All right, let's see. You already talked about your mom having your sister at 16, which is amazing. Yeah. And the world isn't fair. I wanted to say that when you said that, like, you got to go to Wellesley. Like, the world isn't fair. No,
it's
not. No. But if you can just decide, the world isn't fair, but if it's set up so badly that we're all fucked, then there's a problem. Yeah. At least the playing field needs to be a little bit more even. And then then everybody has their karma or whatever you want to say, because life isn't fair. But the way it's set up, it's like we're screwing ourselves.
Life isn't fair, but it doesn't have to be so deeply unfair.
Yes, that's exactly, yes. Has a man ever gotten paid more than you know from the same job? Yes, absolutely, probably. Oh, no. Yes, always, probably. From what I know.
Would pretty much. So when I worked at the state, I oversaw a team of 15 pretty senior folks, like really badass leaders. And lo and behold, all of the women were paid less. And all of the non-white employees were paid less. And so we bumped up people, but it's so pervasive. It's everywhere.
Were the non-white women paid less than the white women?
In this case, this small group, there were only white women. So that tells you a different answer to the same question. The same answer to the same answer to the same question.
They weren't even getting paid.
Yeah. Yes.
All right.
At that level, in that scene.
How do you see things changing for women today? Not well.
So part of it, like we're pushing against these tensions, right? And I think that's really important. What I find deeply disturbing is that millions of women have left the workforce in this period. So
people are pushing back on you on that. They're pushing back hard on Twitter. Well, I don't even understand why they're pushing back. It's a fact, right?
People are like, I was like, listen, like, you can have your reality and then I can have my Department of Labor numbers, you know?
Just my hot numbers, baby.
Like, I don't understand. It's, so on one hand, I do think we're moving in the right direction, because I could not have found a platform and a place of privilege to communicate something against someone powerful, for instance, which is what I'm doing against my former boss on some level. So that's important, because the climate has changed. There's been a democratization of information in some respects. That's good. It helps us. At the same time, the caregiving is fucking all women still. Yeah. Whether it's for kids, it's for parents, it's for siblings. This caregiving basically is an avalanche that has destroyed the advances that women have made in 30 years. And it doesn't matter if someone wants to work or not.
Can you say that again? I want you to say it again, Lindsay. I want you to say it again. So say it again. So the caregiving isn't just for children. It's for parents, for siblings. Yeah.
This is so you can be someone caregiving for a kid. You can be someone caregiving for your mom and your dad, for your sister, your brother in a pandemic. You can be doing all of those things. And the basic reality is you're doing it because you're a woman. That's just the facts. And
it's the expectation of the family that the woman should do it.
It's the expectation. And as a result of that, this avalanche is basically undoing this avalanche of the pandemic, and this caregiving necessity, deep caregiving, has basically undone 30 years of advances for women in this economy. And this is not a battle of if you want to work or if you don't, and you know, those kinds of things. It's not about that.
It's the expectation put on people, on women, that that's their job.
Yes, and it's our position in society and our power vis-a-vis men. And what I see a lot of in this city, when people ask me, Lindsay, what does poverty look like in Manhattan? I mean, it's Manhattan, Lindsay. Come on. You know what poverty looks like in Manhattan? A retired senior woman, because she's alone in the world. Maybe she decided not to get married. maybe she was married, she had kids, her husband died because women outlive men. She took care of her parents. Whatever she did, she's now on a fixed income. She's going to live a long time.
She didn't have a life
and
because
she's
she
in
did
poverty. And she's in fucking poverty. And the piece of that is either because she was underpaid in her career, she didn't have a career because she was doing caregiving, or because she had to dip in and out of the workforce. So everything fucked her over about our system. And that was just starting to get broken up by more women in the workforce and staying in the workforce and making more money. And then you have this avalanche of the pandemic that just fucking undoes everything. And so on one hand, I'm glad we're talking about these issues, and then I have a platform to do that. That is certainly an advancement. I mean, you and I both can talk about these issues, and someone will write about, you know, something we say at some point, but you can't overcome the numbers. And the numbers are, we've undone 30 years of advances in women's place in society. And that is abysmal. So
see, that's something that's very manageable that I would like to become a voice for, to be able and be able to take the backlash too, because a lot of women will not like me saying that because they're very connected to the caregiving, to that role and to their family. But I don't care.
It's not even about, this is not a judgment call. It's just our power as a whole vis-a-vis a society. Hey, you know what the best endorsement of the power and the importance of caregiving would be? Fucking caregiving support. That's a fucking hard job. Yeah. You know, if we really want to say we value,
or getting paid
work
for it, or getting paid for it.
Yes. And there are caregiving. This isn't a negation of people who choose a different path in life. This is a negation of the deep unfairness of how we do not value the work of women in any arena. And that's what this is about. And what the undervaluing of women means for our outcomes in life. And that is so fucked. And that's why I'm like, we're not so good right now.
No, and I see so many women on Twitter and Facebook writing, can somebody please tell my husband how hard this is to take care of my child? Can somebody, my husband's oblivious.
If I could show you the grays in my hair right now, I'm not going to, but you know, these times are not, you know, these are, when we read in history books, what is that famous quote about, like, you know, in some years, decades happen, in some decades, like, you know, like this is a time of gravity. This is
I thought you were going to say behind every great man is a greater woman.
I mean, I remember being in a boardroom with all of the governor's senior staff, and everyone knew I was like the big feminist. So someone's like, so Lindsay, who's your favorite founding father? And I was like, Abigail Adams, you know, and everyone was like, but I felt like, you know, yeah, she fucking did a lot. She's the wife of a president, a mother of a president.
Yeah.
Her past.
So did Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yes.
But that's what all my work is about, and about how the men stole the women's ideas at the kitchen table. The women would help the man, then the man would go get the credit for it. I'm like, this gets me like nobody's business, because I'm like, and no guy can go out and have a great business without the woman home taking care of the kids. It can't happen.
I mean, that's why I love,
and I'm the only girl, and I'm the one taking care of my mom, helping financially and being her caregiver. Look I have very wealthy brothers, and I am the only girl, and I'm the one taking care of my mom, helping her financially and being her caregiver. What the fuck?
And this is I think the ultimate show of valuing that work, which is deeply valuable and deeply talented and deeply important, would be fucking helping women through that, you know. But
you should be getting paid. Like, she should be getting paid by her brothers.
Exactly.
But here's the thing: it's again the shame. So women have to carry all the shame. So if we're afraid to say that out loud. You're not supposed to say that about your mother. You're not supposed to say that. So your brothers say, "Oh, don't talk bad about your mother. You should do it. It's your job." And then we have shame because we're like, "Of course I love my mother, but I also want to fucking have a life and not be fucking exhausted all the time." Like. So the shame is what keeps us. So if I keep doing the show, it's going to break the isolation and the shame for women.
The shame is the most powerful tool of the patriarchy. It truly is. Like, think about sexual harassment and abuse. Like, the deep shame I have felt about being someone that a powerful man viewed in a sexual way, when what I wanted was to be taken seriously for my abilities and my intelligence. that the shame is overwhelming, and that's a power of the patriarchy, all of it. And the only way to undo that is to talk about it. And
yeah. And how many women are going to watch this? And even the guys, because it's good for the guys to hear too, because they're like, oh, because most guys will tell you, I don't want to do that to my wife. I don't want to do that. It's like, but you are. But it's happening. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Sustainability. What kind of sustainability? What kind of hard numbers? What kind of plan of action? What are we going to do to change this?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the women are isolated. I'm telling you, Allison just saying that about, I bet you the shame of like, how dare you not take care of your mother? How dare you ask?
And she's not saying I don't want to do it. She's just saying, you know, like, oh, that's my reality too. That's your reality. Yeah. Okay. Wouldn't it be great if we could talk about that and collaborate and find a way to change the way society handles us, because so many of us are confronted with it.
But I find it
called
interesting.
a political campaign, you know?
Exactly. I might be speaking out of turn, but what I'm getting, Allison said she had wealthy brothers and she's the one taking care of the mother. So this whole dynamic, this power dynamic that I've been talking about in politics, in workplace, in entertainment industry, on the micro level, in the family, is if Allison were to say, you guys, I want you to help me pay for mom or whatever, then it would expose that they're not taking care of their mom, so they would shame her more. That's the dynamic that goes on. Her mom isn't even sick. It's the financial burden and the loneliness. Yeah, look at that. So why not have them contribute some other way? If they're all about money, then give some money. It's a respect thing. Sometimes money does represent respect. I'm always like, it's never about it is about the money, but it's not about the money. And here, it wouldn't be about the money, but it would be about the money, because the money would be an example of like, we appreciate what you're doing.
Yes, and I think one of the biggest things is, no, it's not about the money, but if you end up being destitute because you cared for everyone else, and I can tell you, based on being a public servant, that is a big reality for women, we've got to make it about the money, because no one deserves to be buying cat food for dinner because they can't afford their fixed income, and because the world didn't respect what they were doing enough to give them the means to retire on more than cat food. And that is not a fake made up story. That's a pretty normal story in New York City. How fucked up is that?
It's totally fucked up. And I meant, when I say it's not about the money, I'm not saying that we shouldn't get the money. I'm saying they want to turn it that way. Yeah, they want to say, oh, you're greedy. You're this. It's like, no.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
They want to turn it and say, oh, you're being greedy. Oh, you're greedy. No, I'm not greedy. I need to pay. I need to eat. I need to take care of myself. How many times I've been financially abused in my career is insane, because they can't always get me sexually, because I'll fucking punch them in the face. Yeah. So they get me financially. They get so mad and they get me financially. What can I do to help female employees succeed in her work when her family requests are holding her back? Alternatively, how can employers help? Oh, look at that question.
Yeah.
What can I do? Lindsay, you answer it first, and then I'll go.
So read the full question again.
Okay, what can I do to help female employees succeed in her work when her family requests are holding her back? Alternatively, how can employers help? That's such a good question.
It's a great question. You know, I do think remote work, I don't know what kind of business you're in, but I think remote work and flexibility, like FaceTime, is the most destructive thing for women who have caregiving responsibilities. I think first, paying someone enough that they can pay caregiving support, because that's a big reason why women leave the workforce, because they're making less than it would cost them to pay a caregiver, right? So they make that choice. So that's one big barrier. But another is the FaceTime thing. Like, I really do think so much of the culture of work was showing up in person just to show that you care and be there. And I, aside from like, and I, you know, for instance, when I was waitressing, that's different. You got to show up, right? But I do think that acknowledging someone's work, asking them how you can help them achieve their success, because, you know, we don't know, we can't assume we know people's lives. Like, maybe one of their children has learning difference and they have to approach parenting in a different way. We don't know what their co-parenting situation is like, for example, or we don't know what their family situation is like. So I do think sometimes literally just asking, saying, hey, I really think you do great work on X. How can I, within my scope, be as helpful as possible, you know, helping you do what you do best? And, you know, I've had employees that it took them a while to tell me that they had like that they had a medical challenge or they had a family challenge. And it's very easy, it's fun, and it feels really good to find ways to support people in that. It actually enriched my work experience to be able to say, gosh, how do we work around this person's, you know, time situation or, you know, in-person reality to make them a success? Because it does feel better for someone else to, like, to see someone else catapult in their career. It feels really good. And I think if you genuinely ask them, it helps.
Okay, so this is interesting. Somebody said, are they family requests holding her back, or is that the employer's perspective? That's interesting, because as Lindsay was talking, I was like, that's a good perspective. And I'm thinking the employer's a man. What I'm thinking, this is what I always feel about with the men. Yeah. Give her some of the scoop. Give her some of the male. Tell her what the men do. Tell her some of the inside scoop and let her know how to do it. And also have boundaries. That's, if you're going to be a boss and you're going to be a leader, have boundaries for her so that she can hold herself. Meaning, secretly, you can do it secretly. You don't even have to tell her. Have boundaries around her having self-esteem about herself and showing up for herself before letting other people be a priority. If he's witnessing her getting drained, that's the way I took it, that he's witnessing her getting drained and not caring about herself and her job. So as a boss, you can just put boundaries around her and help her show up, and that will help everywhere in her family. If she's the one that's hurting and she's having struggles with her family, then put the boundaries around her. Yeah. And then help her show up. Give her enough money, put the boundaries around her, and then it'll pull it back together. I think we're supposed to help the people who need the help, right?
Hey, if you can, pay them. You know, money can't solve every problem, but money can certainly help coordination challenges in families, for sure.
Right, and have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk about it. And they might not tell you, and then have another conversation. And then I always say, find the best and bring it out. Bring the best out of this. But what's the best in this woman's job? Find what it's like, get the high numbers. That's what I always say. I'm like, okay, what does she do that's valuable to your company? How many hours does that really take? Can she do it on FaceTime? Just get her to, just cut the baloney, right? Just find out what it is. Give her a little bit more money. Ask her how much she needs for the caretaking. Maybe she only needs it for 2 days. Like, just talk to people. Treat them with respect. Does she only need the caregiving for 2 days? Give her the money for that. What does she do that's valuable to your company, and maximize that? Bring that out in her. Bring that out in everybody. You can do that for the men too, but the men also have to tell the girls the women the secrets. You have to let us in. You have to tell her. Yes. Give her the secrets. What you see.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
Give us the goods. Tell us what's going on. Be transparent. Let us know. Lyndsey, I could do this for you with you for like 75 hours.
Do it again. We got to do it again in a few months or something, if you can.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Love it. Love it.
I love it too. Right. I love you. You're amazing.
You're amazing. This was amazing. Thank you so much, you guys. Lindsay Boylan on Twitter.
Yes.
We're out. And Instagram, it's what? What is it? Lindsay Boylan, right?
Lindsay Boylan NY on Instagram.
NY. You guys go follow her. Send her your ideas. Follow her. All right. Please. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.